From the Alvin and Rosalie Sarachek studio, PBS Kansas presents Kansas Week.
Sedgwick County offers more help for those representing themselves in family court. The wife of a newly elected Sedgwick County commissioner charged with electioneering. But first, new downtown restrooms and paid parking causing an uproar at the Wichita City Council meeting. We'll discuss what the council did and did not do, and what happens next on this edition of Kansas Week. Hello and welcome to Kansas Week. I'm Jared Cerullo. A marathon city council meeting Tuesday night attracted scores of Wichitans unhappy with the prospect of paid downtown parking and spending $500,000 on public restrooms. Cake's Kate Devine shows us what happened.
I was against the bathrooms 100%. I think it's crazy that the city council just spent $500,000 on 2 porta potties to be located in downtown Wichita.
Councilmember Dalton Glasscock says the restrooms are a waste of taxpayer dollars.
We have public bathrooms that are closed right now, and they're closed due to vandalism, and they're closed due to nefarious activity. I think that's what we should be addressing. That's the root cause.
Wichita City Council voted 4-3 to approve spending around $500,000 for 2 restrooms at 2 public parks. These restrooms have been met with opposition from people saying it will cost too much when other restrooms aren't being used across the city. Others disagree.
You know, we have a wonderful park with Napsker Park, and I think the restroom was one of the missing pieces of that. Like I said today, I've got kids. I've got one kid who chooses when she wants to go to the bathroom and maybe not always does it before an event.
Councilmember Brandon Johnson says having a public restroom at Napsker will benefit citizens. Many of the people that came to the meeting showed frustration on the parking issue, like downtown business owner Dan Norton.
As a concerned business owner, the negative feedback on social media seems to be a 99% disapproval rating. People saying, I guess we're not going downtown if we have to pay for parking, which obviously scares small hospitality business owners.
But they don't like any of the proposals on the table, or at least not enough of them like any of the proposals on the table. So the city's going to have to come up, the city staff is going to have to come up with yet more proposals.
Friends professor Dr. Russell Arbin Fox says the city needs to come up with some way of managing downtown parking that they can all agree with.
So that one, the city actually makes enough revenue so that they don't have to take maintenance out of the general fund. It can actually pay for itself. And 2, actually take some responsibility for creating a more healthy downtown parking environment.
He says it's not just the parking issue or the long meetings people are upset about. It's the uncertainty.
There's a lot of frustration that's simply tied to we don't know what's going to happen, we don't know how it's going to happen, we don't know when it's going to happen. We've elected people to make decisions. Please make a decision.
And here to discuss the City Council's actions and some of the week's other big stories is City Councilman Dalton Glasscock, Cake News senior political reporter Pilar Pedraza, Emporia State political science professor Michael Smith, and Wichita State professor emeritus Ed Flingy. Dalton, Councilman, I'll start with you since you were on the council. You've been very outspoken about public restrooms. We'll start with public restrooms. We've got a couple of topics here. Why are you so outspoken about the cost of these restrooms?
Well, Jared, the average home price in Wichita is $197,000. And when I talk to constituents and I talk to citizens, they're worried about overspending of government. I know that there's local providers that can do it more because I've had local providers reach out about the interest of doing this. And so I'm not in opposition to public restrooms. I'm a runner. I use downtown. I live downtown. I work downtown. I go to church downtown. I'm always downtown. But right now we have restrooms only 0.2 miles away from Napsker Park that are currently closed due to vandalism. Let's address that before spending $500,000 on 2 other porta potties.
You mentioned other bidders. Did the council go out for public bids on this?
It did go out for public bid, and that happened during the previous council. And so what actually happened this past Tuesday was it was over our engineer's estimate, and so they had to come back for more money to put the allocation of bathrooms. So we ended up spending about $630,000 when you include all installation for these 2 public restrooms.
And it's interesting, this passed on a 4-3 vote, so a split council. What does that say about the sentiment in the city about this topic?
I think a lot of divides you see are members that are served on a previous council and members that are new. And so when council members have voted for something in the previous tenure they had, they continue to usually support it. And that's really, I think, the divide that you saw in this issue.
All right. Pilar, any comments about this?
Well, I can see the argument for these particular potties. There are certain elements of them that's supposed to make them more immune to the vandalism issues that we've dealt with. But when you look at the populace, you look at the inflation that we've been dealing with, and the fact that folks are concerned about being able to hold on to their homes, being able to feed their families, and then they're seeing just seeing that number, $250,000 for a single porta potty, even if it does have steel instead of plastic, it doesn't compute in the electorate's mind, and so it's very, very clear why the public is adamantly against this.
But should the council listen to the public, where they're supposed to be representative of their
Well,
constituents?
that's an argument on whether we're a representative democracy or a republic.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Michael Smith, it's definitely been very outspoken in the last couple of weeks since this topic came about.
I don't pretend to have any expertise on this, but I do know a couple of things. One is that public facilities are very different from home facilities because of the amount of use they get. You can't build a restroom like you would in your house because of the use, the weather, and other factors. The other issue is that ever since the Americans with Disabilities Act passed, championed by Kansas's own Bob Dole, a great thing, a landmark law, but honestly, making things accessible raises the cost quite a bit. Now, is it worth it? You bet. But accessibility is a major factor in public facilities today, and it does impact the cost.
Dalton, any response to that?
We have inaccessible facilities in some of our facilities. There are porta potties that we can rent that are accessible. And, you know, I appreciate all the perspectives of my colleagues, but when we talk about, you know, an event at NASCAR Park, well, we have 20,000 people in one bathroom is not going to work in itself.
Yeah.
And so when we have events, we have to bring in other facilities anyway. And so these facilities aren't meant to just be for one event.
Okay, we'll move on to paid parking. We've got to talk about that as well. That's obviously been a hot topic. We've been talking about this since the beginning of the year, right?
Yes, and I agree with Professor Fox on the video. We have to make a decision. Citizens have elected us to make a decision, and that's why it was the sole vote that we didn't delay this until December 10th. We've talked about this since 2009 in some capacity. The council's talked about this since January and August. We have to make a decision.
5 plans, Pilar? Is 5 plans maybe too many to decide on?
I honestly, for the public, I think it is.
You've got 7 council members.
You know, it's as a former teacher, I'm going to dig into my teacher pocketbook here for a minute. As a former teacher, you don't give kids a dozen different options. You ask them chocolate or vanilla. You give them the binary and let them make the choice. 5 plans for the council to pick from, okay, you know, they're more versed in all of the details going into this and all the other considerations. But the public that's just hearing dribs and drabs through the news media, you know, give them the binary. That's what they need. And so they, in lack of that, they're going yes or no.
Yeah. As a user of downtown, what do you think as a citizen?
Well, I don't live here. I don't have the inside perspective. Just give you a little context. Parking is a classic example of one of those things that we think of as free that's not. There's a lot of money spent on the infrastructure. A friend of mine designs parking garages. Every stall in a parking garage costs as much as the car parked in it. Yeah. Add all that up. And so it's part of our way of life. We're a very car-dependent community. I know you're a car-dependent city here in Wichita. We take it for granted. We don't see the cost. And I get the public's perspective. I like free parking too, but it isn't actually free. The real question is, who should pay for it and how?
Right. Someone has to pay for it. Professor Flingy, right?
Well, who pays, who benefits? That's why Dalton's paid big bucks and
to make those decisions.
To make those decisions. I've been here in the Wichita area for nearly 50 years, and downtown development's been on the agenda for all of those years. And in a sense, we're here because of our success, because people want to park downtown. the issue initially was vacating downtown and to the suburbs. And so this is a current wrinkle of having to do with downtown development.
Right.
And I applaud the council for taking it on. I'm glad to hear Dalton say that they'll get this figured out, and I think they will. But it's just the latest version of downtown development.
All right. Good topic. We'll move on to our next story now. The wife of Sedgwick County Commission-elect Jeff Blubaugh is facing a December 17th court appearance now. Megan Blubaugh is charged with electioneering, accused of wearing a campaign T-shirt to a polling place. Cake's Abby Ray explains what happened and why it matters.
Electioneering is a crime by statute, and the intent behind these laws is to preserve the safe and uncoerced environment for voters.
The Kansas Secretary of State published this video before the 2024 presidential election to remind voters about the laws of electioneering. Kansas has had electioneering laws since 1974, banning anyone from influencing voters by wearing clothing, hats, buttons, or signs featuring a particular candidate or issue within 250 feet of a polling location. So why is there still confusion on this law? And why do some people try to break the rules?
Many people do it by accident.
Dr. Michael Smith, a political analyst from Emporia State, explains these laws are in place to discourage voter intimidation, but it's very easy to get caught up in the excitement of voting and accidentally wear political clothing to the polls.
Several years ago, I showed up with a T-shirt on with a political message, and I just wasn't thinking about it. I was just excited about the election. And of course, I ran to the car and grabbed a jacket and was good to go. But not all of these mistakes are intentional. Some of them are good faith. People are just excited. They want to share their excitement.
It's not clear if that's what happened with the newly elected County Commissioner Jeff Blubaugh's wife, Megan Blubaugh. This picture shows her at the polls days before the election, wearing a Blubaugh shirt. Witnesses say she refused to turn it inside out, and the district attorney is now charging her with electioneering.
These laws exist because they were an issue in elections historically. The election process we have today is more regulated than before.
A spokesperson for Sedgwick County says the incident involving Mrs. Blubaugh was the only official electioneering complaint here, but the election office says at least 5 other people came in to vote wearing political messaging. When asked to remove the clothing, they complied, and so the county says these do not count as official complaints.
Most people are not going to change their vote because they saw somebody's hat or T-shirt or what have you. So in some ways, maybe the laws are a little bit old-fashioned. But again, there is this idea that our current climate is so polarized that things could start to escalate.
He says poll workers enforcing the electioneering laws can vary due to a lack of standardized training, but ultimately it's up to them to uphold the law.
And Professor Smith, I'll start with you. Good comments there. And it's really interesting that you talked about some people do it by accident, because it happened to me. I ran for a city council seat in 2021. Both me and my spouse walked into the polling place, and my spouse was wearing a shirt that had my name on it. Sure. They caught us at the beginning. So talk about that more, about how it does happen by accident. Many people may not even know the law.
Well, I've done it too. I mentioned it in the video clip. It's a good faith mistake in many cases. And what I don't like is ill treatment of poll workers. We have to remember, poll workers, they're paid a little bit. It's a token. It's not really pay. It's a token. Yeah. They asked to do a lot. Their training is uneven. And in our climate, there are poll workers, I've not heard of this in Kansas, thank goodness, but there are poll workers in other states that have received death threats. So if somebody has to say, hey, you need to grab a jacket, no harm, no foul, but I don't like this talk of being rude or disrespectful to poll workers, because that could escalate.
Yeah. Professor Flingy, the discourse, the civil discourse that we have in this country right now, does that play any factor into what's going on here?
Well, I applaud Mark Bennett, the district attorney, for taking a stand on this. He will be overseen, his operation will be overseen by the spouse of this offender. And making a point of it in the era of a fairly nasty state and national campaign, it's a modest violation. but it is a violation. The spouse should have known that it was a violation, so I applaud the district attorney for making a point of it. She will have to appear before court, likely apologize, and
maybe
the
a fine.
punishment will be quite mild, I would guess. I doubt if there will be jail time. Maybe a modest fine.
It is a misdemeanor, as Pilar just said.
Yeah.
Pilar, I tried to do some research. I couldn't find anybody that's been charged with electioneering in Kansas before. Has it ever happened? Do you know?
I don't know. That's not one of the questions Abby asked when she was working on this story, and I was kind of coming in secondhand, helping her a little bit at the end with it, but I wasn't part of the information gathering, so I'm not entirely sure if we've ever had actual charges before, but it's not something historically that has reached the point of charges. It has generally been, take it off, take the hat off, turn your t-shirt inside out, people comply, it's no big deal. It's become a bigger issue this election for a couple of reasons. One, of course, the political discourse that you mentioned has become extremely divisive and political. But the other one is actually that both sides, both campaigns, made basically campaign merchandise part of their fundraising efforts. And were selling t-shirts and hats. And it was like suddenly you were affiliating with a sports team.
Yeah.
Now, if you have ever been in a stadium where you're supporting the team, but they're the away team. So you're one of 40 and you're surrounded by 40,000.
Yeah.
You can understand. Those 40,000 may not even interact with you ever, but they're all dressed the same and cheering the same. There is a level of pressure there. And that is why we have these laws. Because you don't ever have to say a word wearing these outfits. But just the fact that you are wearing them, and if you suddenly walk into a polling site and you're going to vote for candidate A, and there are 10 people there and 8 of them are wearing outfits for candidate B, so, and they're your neighbors, half of them live right up the street from you or right next door to you, there is a silent level of pressure there. And that's what these laws are designed to prevent.
Councilman Glasscock, anything to add?
Kansas seems to have some of the strictest electioneering laws that I've seen. I was a polling judge previously, and so I remember actually having to go to people's homes at 4 a.m. and take down yard signs from their front yard because they lived across from a polling place. And so there's a lot of communities that you can actually campaign up through the door of it. And so I'll be interested to see how this works out in our legal process as well, based on other states' electioneering laws.
All right. Hiring a lawyer to represent you in court can often be very expensive. Now, Sedgwick County is offering more help for litigants who represent themselves in family court. KSN's Zena Taher explains why it's needed.
Back in the spring, every judge who handles family law cases in the county joined in asking for funding to pay for a lawyer to assist at the Family Self-Help Center. They say the role is essential for making sure people representing themselves in family law cases are properly prepared to avoid rescheduling or delays. For now, the county has a volunteer replacement. Every Monday and Friday, Luke Nath goes to the County Self-Help Center and gives people legal aid.
It proved invaluable for the court that the pro se clients would come in prepared because they're representing themselves. They would come in prepared for court, and then they would come prepared when they're filing with the clerks. So they would know what they were doing.
He spent a year learning from his predecessor, who recently retired, helping with filling out child support worksheets.
I helped with that, and then, of course, talked to them about how to make their presentation. These are people that have never before maybe spoken in public.
While seemingly fast sessions, less than an hour, they're typically expensive and inaccessible to many.
The more complex the issue and issues involved, it's thousands and thousands of dollars that they would be needing to spend to afford an attorney.
The service helps people be prepared for court, which helps judges. A case can take twice the time to finish if paperwork isn't filled out right.
We would go back to the days where the self-represented litigants would come into court without the necessary paperwork, and we'd be back in the situation where we had to instruct them to get it and to reschedule court and have them come back a second time.
Yeah, and many times, Pilar, I'll start with you. Money should not be a factor here for many of these people that have to deal with unfortunate circumstances like this.
Most definitely. In the criminal system, we have court-appointed attorneys for a reason. But in family court, if you're just trying to get a simple custody case finished or a protection from abuse or anything like that, you're dealing with issues. One, you're dealing with psychological issues already because of the family issues that are going on. And then you're dealing with financial issues. And the vast majority of people who are going through these don't have thousands of dollars sitting in an account. I mean, it costs about $1,500, $1,600 usually to just put a lawyer on retainer. And then it goes from there because there's so many hours involved. I mean, I had a friend recently who got a speeding ticket, questioned the validity of it, and was considering fighting it in court. Contacted me. I'm like, well, this is what I know about the law that was involved. Let me double check. Of course, I know a lot of people. I'm reaching out to the people I know who maybe know a little bit more about it, trying to verify that my understanding is correct. That would the amount of time put into it, just deciding whether or not to fight that ticket, would have been thousands of dollars dealing with an attorney as opposed to a friend. And most people don't have the friends with that level of knowledge and those contacts.
True. But again, Councilman Glasscock, it begs the question, who's paying for this? Someone's got to pay for it.
Well, we also think of the efficiencies that this is offering the court system. And so I believe this will pay for itself and how much time it saves our judges. When all of our judges universally agree on this, it's probably a positive thing. And so I think this will actually save the court more time and resources.
Good point. Professors, anything to add?
Well, I think that this is a good example of things that are often out of sight, out of mind, and tend to get underfunded. This makes a huge difference in people's lives. It kind of reminds me of the public defender system, although that's different, I know, but nobody wants to fund it until it's your family that's affected. And so many of the things government does are not sensationalistic, but they affect people's lives.
Right.
Well, this comes down to the basics of the Declaration, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those cost money. They are not cheap. They are not free.
That's right.
Our last story today, Wichita Public School officials say USD 259 had its highest graduation rate ever in 2024. KAKE's Kate Devine examines why.
They don't bring you down. They sit there and they help you. They give you resources of any kind that you need to push yourself to get to where you need to be.
For South High School senior Mackenzie Dorr, the support of her teachers made all the difference in her being able to graduate.
Found out that I was having a little girl actually. I had found out last year, and when I had told the staff here about it, they were super supportive.
Dorr says the staff at South allowed her to go on the Homebound program, which allows students to do schoolwork at home while staying on track to graduate. And in exactly 1 month, she will be able to walk across the stage.
I get the chance to graduate early, so my actual last day is actually December 19th.
Principal Travis Rogers of South High School says the district's focus on initiatives like extended learning were key to the Wichita Public Schools' success.
The conversations, the reminders, the phone calls home, deadlines that they were able to surpass and just help the kid. And so truly it's the teachers, that's where the magic happens. We have a great staff here that truly works with our kids.
The support systems at schools across Wichita provided resources and helped students navigate challenges, including homelessness.
We graduated 73.1% of our students that are considered homeless in the class of 24.
Assistant Superintendent Dr. Lauren Hatfield says of the 36 subgroup categories the students are divided into, 25 of them achieved their highest graduation rate this past May.
Having learning centers available in every single one of our comprehensive high schools so that students can earn credit at a pace which allows them to graduate on time.
Hatfield says staff at the schools didn't want students to just graduate, but to be successful in the real world.
Also had a lot of staff. We had senior liaisons who really worked on finding students who were maybe a couple credits off track from graduating and found ways to help those kids come to school.
Professor Flingy, I'll start with you, the educator at the table, one of the educators. In fact, I think we have 3 educators at the table this week, actually.
Well, this is good news, and it makes me think of the challenges of urban education today. The Wichita school systems often compared to the urban or suburban districts in a negative light. Our church community adopted one of the 90 schools in the Wichita public system, Gammon Elementary School. And my wife and I attended an event there, and it was like a United Nations delegation. There are over 20 native languages spoken there. And the challenges that Wichita faces in performance are with poverty and social economic issues are really difficult compared to our suburban districts.
Right. And Professor Smith, it's interesting that the Wichita School District is coming up on a bond issue, but they're going to ask voters for another bond issue here coming up in February. Does that have anything to do with graduation rates?
Good publicity always helps. So many school districts have a lot of deferred maintenance and older buildings. Nobody likes it when you close their local school, but keeping an older building that's half occupied open is not the solution either. I also wanted to mention, as a professor, I'm seeing this too. I actually really enjoy teaching today's generation of younger people. There are a lot of things I like about them, but you have to understand, you have to respond to each one as a person. That the one size fits all just doesn't work. And apparently the school district understands that.
Yeah. With about a minute left, Pilar, what do you think?
Well, I think this is great. This is an example of individualized education, which is something that we have talked about in the education circles, the K-12 circles, for the last 20-some years plus. This is an example of also efficiency versus results. You know, you talked about efficiency earlier. The school system as we have it is designed for efficiency. Get the most kids through successfully. But what about those who fall by the wayside? Do we care about them or not? It's much more expensive. That's why we need some of those bond issues. It's much more expensive to deal with the kids that fall by the wayside, but do they matter? And as a nation, as a state, as a city, we have to make that decision.
20 seconds to respond. Anything, Councilman Glasscock?
It's a win for our community. I think the efficiency, the innovation, this is what kids want. This is how kids learn. I was an adjunct at Wichita State as well, and I saw how people are educating differently now. And this is a win for our community as a whole.
All right. That's a wrap for this week. Thank you so much to Dalton Glasscock, Pilar Pedraza, Michael Smith, and Ed Flinchie for joining us today. And thanks to you for watching as well. I'm Jared Cerullo. We'll see you next week.